This is Sarah Young, how to lose a container in 10 minutes.
So, hello. For a start, I need to say this iMac screen is freaking me out. And I did know it was this big, but if I'd have known that my really bad Photoshop would have been blown up that much, I might have made more effort. Anyway, hello. My name's Sarah Young. I work for this small startup that you may have heard of, I don't know, called Microsoft. It's also a giveaway, this t-shirt that I'm wearing. I am a cloud security architect or specialist, whatever you want to call it. I'm actually based in Australia. I'll talk about that more in a second. But I spend a lot of time outside Australia, and when people see me, they're normally like, hey, where do you live again? Because I never see you in the country you allegedly live in. It's true, I don't spend a lot of time there. I only joined Microsoft quite recently, and I'm very excited that this is the first time I've given this talk, and I get to add in all the bit drawings, because they're adorable. So there you go. This is my full job title, Azure Cloud Security and Compliance Global Black Belt. Yeah, I know. I'm not joking, this is genuinely my job title. So I tell people that I fight hackers, like literally with the black belt there. That's not true, but yeah, basically what my job is I advise customers for Microsoft about cloud security and how to do security in the cloud well. And hopefully, if you're a company that cares about compliance, which lots of companies do nowadays, I'll tell you how to do that better as well. Just a quick word of caution. Please Google my name, well, with caution. I have a very common last name and a very common first name. If you Google me, you may find Sarah Young, the Christian author. I saw her book in Hawaii last year, and I didn't buy it because it was $30 at CVS, but I took my photo with it. I'm cool. Also, the one that I can't put a picture up of, put a picture up is Sarah Young, the late 80s porn star. Now, I'm not joking, so don't go and Google that and think I'm joking and do it on your work machine, because it is true. Just in case you don't know where Melbourne is, it's down here at the bottom. I always like to think I've come further than everybody else when I go to conferences. I try and do that just because I like that strange badge of honor. I'm not sure if anyone's come further than me for BSides San Francisco. They may have done, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's where Melbourne is if you don't know. And because I get asked this a lot when I'm in North America, I'm just going to cover this one off now. This will kill you in Australia. This will also kill you. A funnel web spider will kill you. Jellyfish will kill you. The crocodiles will kill you. And this really, really ripped kangaroo would definitely kill you. That's real as well. That's not photoshopped. He's called Roger, and he died about a month ago, and it made the headlines in Australia, of course. Yeah, I know. But big male red kangaroos are really ripped. Like, scary ripped. It's weird. And also cockatoos drink beer or whatever. I don't know. So the point is, just in summary, everything in Australia is trying to kill you. I know. Is it dangerous to live in Australia? No, because if you live in a city, you'll literally never see anything like this. But if you want to come and talk to me about it later, please do. Anyway, I think I've wasted about 4 minutes of my time by just talking about Australia and where I come from. So what am I actually going to talk about today? Container security. So, containers, orchestrators, in particular Kubernetes, all the thing of the moment. So I'm going to talk about good practices for securing your containers and for securing your orchestrator. Now, when I'm talking about orchestrators, I'm going to mostly talk about Kubernetes because, in my opinion, that's kind of becoming the de facto standard. Now, I know there are other orchestrators out there, and if you want to come and talk to me about other orchestrators, I have my own rants about them. And a lot of the things I'm going to say are applied to any other orchestrators, but I will keep saying Kubernetes. Also, a lot of things that go hand in hand with this, another thing is moving to the cloud. Now, it doesn't matter which cloud you're moving to. I'm not here to push any cloud in particular, but often when you're moving an application into the cloud, you'll be containerizing it. So these things kind of go together. They're not mutually exclusive, but I'll be talking a lot about that too. So, we're talking about good security practices for containers, Kubernetes, and related tools. Now, I do use a lot of GIFs or GIFs in my presentations. They may or may not be relevant. If they're really weird and irrelevant, I will try and explain them if you don't get my sense of humor. But I've broken this down into 5 bits, which is protecting your data, caring for your OS and your orchestrators, checking privilege, shifting left with containers, and a little experiment I did, which was where the title of this talk came from, which was getting my containers owned. Now, I think most people in here will have guessed where the title of my talk comes from. It comes from the rom-com from years ago, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Now, if you haven't seen that film, it's about a lady called Andy, or Kate Hudson, who decides she'll make all the common dating mistakes that women make to try and drive off a guy in 30 days. So I thought, I'm going to make all the common mistakes people make when deploying containers, security-wise, and see if I can get my container owned in 10 minutes. Now, when I submitted to the CFP for this, it was in the very, very early stages of the experiment. So we'll come back to this, but I'll just caveat with, we're not going to log into any live containers this afternoon because it didn't work out quite as planned. So there you go. Before I go any further, by the way, did anyone literally come to this talk because I promised chocolate on Twitter? By the way, I'm not wearing my glasses because I left my contact lenses at home and I'm just being vain. So you have to wave if you're any further back than like the first 3 rows. Like you really need to wave a lot for me to be able to see you, because I'll throw you chocolate right now. You can be honest. You're supposed to be at the front. You can come down and get it later if you want. Because I do genuinely have chocolate here that's shaped like a koala. Anyway. So this sums up container and Kubernetes security for me. Not monkey emojis, but as most of you probably know, this is monkey see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. When people are moving into the cloud and containerizing applications, they just seem to think with security, well, we already have some security practices. We already have some tools, we have some processes. We can just apply exactly the same thing into containers and it's fine. We don't need to think about it. No vulnerabilities. I see nothing, I hear nothing. It's fine. Anybody relate to this if they've done something like that in their organization? Again, you really need to wave quite a lot for me to see you. Okay, whatever. So let's moving on to our first one, which is good data protection practices. Now, in the words of Mary Poppins, this isn't actually a Mary Poppins quote originally, but it's the only place I know it from. Well begun is half done. Now, this is not container specific. And I'm going to now espouse to you what every single security person will have said to developers time and time and time again, which is, please tidy up your application. But if you're actually moving to the cloud and containerizing things, this is the perfect opportunity to do it. Like if you've got a rubbishy old application that's still using Telnet, that's using deprecated protocols, stop, tidy it up. Some of these changes are 5 minutes. I seriously, in a previous job, had some developers come to me with an application they wanted to put into the cloud, and it still had Telnet on it. And they're like, is this fine? And I'm like, no, this is not fine. And it's like a 5-minute change. It wasn't as if the application didn't support something different. So actually go and tidy things up. Everything should be encrypted at rest. Everything should be encrypted in transit. If you have a really old application that uses some weird, crazy, deprecated protocol that can't be encrypted, really you should be putting it in some kind of VPN tunnel. Now I know that's a little bit more complicated, but please try and do it. And I know that you'll have a limited project scope, you'll have limited budgets, but some of these are really quick and easy. And as we all know with security, hygiene is literally the most important thing. It's all I'm going to go on about for the next 20 minutes. Next thing is isolation. This is a quote from Jimmy Page. I have absolutely no idea what he's referring to, but it was the only vaguely famous person quote about isolation I could find. So when we move to the cloud and when we containerize, we isolate things. Does everybody know zero trust? I'm in San Francisco, so I expect everyone should. Like 1 person. Sorry if there's 2 people. Thanks for waving a lot. 3. I can count as well. So when we move to the cloud, we should be using a zero trust model. And if you don't know what that means, what it means is that instead of having your traditional security castle, I'm doing this in the wrong order. I'm going to click through to another slide. Instead of using the traditional castle security model where we have a moat and big walls and impenetrable perimeter, but then as soon as it's breached, it's a free-for-all. Instead of doing that, going back to my other slide, we isolate things. And that means that every instance, every machine, every part in the cloud doesn't inherently trust, and we have to explicitly allow it. The reason we do this is so that if someone breached an instance, a machine in the cloud, or one of your containers, they would hopefully find it difficult to move laterally. And coming on to the next bit of moving into the cloud, I'm only going to touch on this really briefly, but has anyone heard of shared responsibility model? And it doesn't matter what cloud provider you use. Yep, thanks for lots of very enthusiastic waving. Thank you. So, shared responsibility model. If you're not familiar with this, every single cloud provider ever will be talking about this. It is who does what in the cloud and which security controls you're responsible for. And I swear to God, if there's one thing, if you move to the cloud, you need to understand, it's this. Because it's, whether it's Google, AWS, Microsoft, whoever, it doesn't matter. It's which security controls are you responsible for and which ones are they responsible for. And it differs depending on the kind of model you're using. So, look at it in terms of different home ownerships. So SaaS, software as a service, that's like a hotel room. Basically, almost everything's done for you. You pretty much just turn up and use it. Platform as a service, like a furnished apartment. So you have to do a bit of cleaning. They only come and service it like once or twice a week. An IaaS, infrastructure as a service, that's a rental. So you're pretty much looking after it. You just kind of pay for the shell. Maybe not shell. You actually just pay for the apartment. And then private cloud, you run everything because it's your house. Hopefully that makes sense. There's loads of different analogies. There's also things like pizza as a service. That one's cool as well, but I'll go with that one because I could find a nice picture. So I'm going to click through classes. So caring for your OS and your orchestrator. Now, if there's one thing, literally one thing. I know I just said that about something else as well, but if there is one thing you really should do with container security, it is this, which is control the images. Control the images you're using to build your containers. I don't care what OS you're using, if it's Alpine, if you're just using a straight up WordPress, or I don't care what it is, but make sure it comes from a decent source. So, of course, when you're first building your container repository, you're going to have to pull something from the internet. But even official repositories can have problems. Last year, there were compromised images on the official Docker hub, and they had Bitcoin miner or something in it, the usual kind of compromised thing. But it had been downloaded something like 60,000 times before they found it. So that's at least 60,000 containers running, if not more, with a Bitcoin miner in. So you shouldn't just be pulling from random things on the internet. Pull an image from the internet, make it your base image, secure it, run check marks across it, maybe put your security tools on it, whatever, and then store it in a private image repository. Now, if you're in the cloud, all the major cloud providers have them, and they're free, so use them. Oh, they're not always free. Some of them are free. And all the third-party ones, if you have a problem with using cloud ones, because what you don't want is like some kind of surprise attack, and it turns out there's, yeah, I know, cat GIF. Like when you can't think of anything else, surprise attack cat GIF. Someone told me they found that upsetting a few days ago, and then I felt a bit awkward. I just thought it was funny, but anyway. I hope no one finds that upsetting, that image. But yeah, you know, if you've downloaded malware or a Bitcoin miner or whatever it is into your container from the word go, I mean, it's game over. Like, there's no point doing anything else. So please do this. Next is the fault in default. I wanted to put The Fault in Our Stars, but then I realized that was a movie about like someone who's terminally ill and it really didn't work. So I kept it like this. Again, I'm talking about Kubernetes. Kubernetes default configs aren't really secure. Now, it does depend on the version you're using. The most recent version, I believe, is version 13, which isn't bad. But I'm not going to assume that if you're in an enterprise environment and you're already using Kubernetes, that you're on version 13. I think you're probably not yet. So you need to work through your orchestrator configs to secure them. Some notable baddies in the older versions of Kubernetes are the API server listening on port 8080 and having no authentication whatsoever. That's great. And secrets management is done in etcd. More about that later. And when I say it's done in etcd, I mean it's encoded in base 64 in etcd. Yeah. Now, CIS, or CIS, is the CenterNet for Internet Security. They've recently released a Kubernetes benchmark. So if you're not too familiar with Kubernetes, you're just introducing it to your organization, you're not super skilled in it yet, and there's no shame in that because it's still pretty new technology. There's a benchmark where you can literally just go through it, and it will give you a tick list of all the things you need to secure to get rid of, just some gotchas and some basic ones, because, these kind of defaults are pretty scary. First time I ever did this talk was in Seattle, so I found a Frasier reference, even though I know that Frasier was not filmed in Seattle, but I love it. If you're a Zelda fan, you'll know it's a secret to everybody. I'm a big Zelda fan. Don't bake creds and secrets into containers. Please, 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 please don't do that. Put them in as variables. As I said before, Kubernetes stores secrets in etcd encoded in base 64. And this meme is a bit old now, but yeah. I really like this one. As we know, base 64 is not encryption. This is not secure. Please don't do this. Again, all major cloud providers have their own built-in secrets management that you can use if you're in the cloud. No matter what cloud you're using, I would recommend that you do just use the native cloud secrets management because it's easier and it will be more compatible. I know there are specific use cases where that may not work properly. I know of I've seen some personally where the certificate length and the key length doesn't work properly. And if that's the case, then there are third-party ones out there. And something that doesn't get mentioned enough, this is kind of a bit of an add-on at the end. If you're doing things in the cloud, please rotate keys regularly. This isn't container specific, but it seems to be something that I don't think is mentioned enough. You should be rotating your keys. Now get it done automated, do it in a function of some sort or a Lambda job, depending on which cloud you're in, but you shouldn't have the same keys in the cloud indefinitely encrypting things. Now, how often you want to do that, I'm not going to say. It might be a month, it might be every 6 months, it might be a year. That's kind of a risk-based discussion that you can pawn off on risk people. But please do it. It's really, really important. And if you're automating it, what's the problem? So now I'm going to tell you my horror story number 1. I have 3 of them. They are extremely vague, and for that I apologize, but they are from previous jobs, and I'm not allowed to give you lots of detail. But a dev needed a slightly different image for his container. He pulled it from a public repository. Anyone want to guess what happened? You can shout. Yes! Bitcoin miner! That is exactly what happened. Now, it was picked up relatively quickly. I would throw a chocolate at you, by the way, but I can't see you. Oh, I can see you just about. Do you want a chocolate? I can try. I'm going to do it anyway. Sorry. That went bad. Okay, I'm going to stop that. You can get one later. Come and get one later. So, check your privilege. Again, I'm not saying anything here that is mind-blowingly new. I just wanted to give a nice overview here. Sorry, everyone's laughing now because I threw chocolate. Don't run as root. Don't run as root. Don't run as root. I couldn't find anything, so I did Groot because I'm funny. So I know there are some very specific instances where you do need to run as root if the container needs to modify the host system. But if that is not the case, you should not be running as root. You really shouldn't. If you do need to do it, then you should be using some kind of runtime security. So there's loads of stuff out there, SE Linux, AppArmor, setcomp profiles, whatever. Use as many as you want to do. I know that some of these, particularly SE Linux, has a bit of a rep for being a complete pain in the ass to configure. But if you haven't tried it in the last few years, I would recommend trying it again because it's actually got a lot easier. And this runtime security, whilst you're putting it on the containers that run as root, just put it on the rest of them as well. Just do it. I know everyone cringes at application whitelisting or runtime security, but it's a good practice. And it's a bit of pain, but go for it. So checking your privilege for orchestrators. So I've got a picture of Clippy because I literally could not find an interesting picture for this slide. And, I work for Microsoft and Clippy, so... Because we all love him. I have Clippy stickers at the end if anyone wants them, by the way. So Kubernetes, yeah, I know. I haven't got that many, so feel free to rush me. People at the front here, you're sorted. So as I said before, Kubernetes has got some terrible defaults depending on which version you're on. Like I said, the newer versions are getting better, but in an enterprise environment, I doubt everyone's running the latest version. Yeah, the dashboard had full admin privileges prior to version 1.7, and there was literally no RBAC in it before version 1.8. Rancher only got RBAC in version 2, which is very, very new, just to throw in a different orchestrator there. Now, if it sounds too onerous to go through orchestrators and change these defaults yourself, or if you don't feel confident, there's no shame in saying, hey, let's have a managed Kubernetes cluster. Again, all the cloud providers do them. They will do a lot of the security for you. Now, it won't be appropriate for every single application that you've got or whatever, but, keep going with it. There's no shame in saying, hey, right now, we don't have the tools to do this, or we don't have the skills, let's use something managed. No shame, promise. Horror story number 2, a Kubernetes cluster, it was a test one, was left exposed to the internet with bad defaults. And anybody want to guess what happened? I won't throw chocolate this time, don't be scared. Yes! I know. It was picked up relatively quickly, and I know there are other threats to containers out there, but Bitcoin miner seems to be the thing du jour, so there you go. So, containing your enthusiasm for shifting left. As I said towards the beginning, I couldn't think of much for this, so don't assume that your old tools, your old security tools that you use in your traditional application stack are okay, because they're probably not. They'll at least need an extra plugin, or you may need to go from scratch. And when I talk about security tools, I really mean your IDS, or heuristics, vuln scanning, your SIEM. I say SIEM, and I know over here everyone says like SIM or something. I can't say that properly. You know what I mean, because I've got it written down. Sorry about my accent. Runtime security and auditing. Like, whatever tools you have, make sure they're actually going to work if you're containerizing things, because there's a good chance you need to tweak them, if not replace them. Same goes for your CI/CD pipeline. Now, if you're actually moving into the cloud, it may be that you've never had a CI/CD pipeline before, which makes it really easy because you're going from scratch anyway. But bear that in mind, you may need to do some research. And talking about research, actually, please go and do some research. Actually go and benchmark things. Don't just read the bullet points on the website and just go buy something. Because I've seen that happen. It doesn't work. And you should be doing this with the devs and with the security team. Because how many times have you seen one team pick a tool that another team is going to use, but the other team had no say in it, and it doesn't work properly, or they don't use it properly? This is what we want. We're all shifting left. We're all going to be friends. We want Ash and Pikachu love. I also do love Pokemon, so this is what we want. We want security and devs working together. And I know it sounds cheesy, but actually, you do get an awful lot of benefit to having both teams agree that this is a tool that's useful for them. Last but not least, horror story number 3 is I saw an organization try to use a traditional vulnerability scanner on their containerized environment. They were telling me how it was brilliant. They had no vulnerabilities at all. Yeah. Because it couldn't see anything. I had a Trump sort of shaking head. This is what I had originally for this slide, but then, like a month, 6 weeks ago, with the government shutdown, I thought my fail picture, this was even better. So, Finally, moving on to my little experiment, and as it said in my CFP submission, for if there's anyone in here who read it, or it may have been in the blurb as well, I decided that I would try and see if I could get myself owned. And how I did this was spinning up containers, Kubernetes clusters, and leaving them open to the internet for a few months. And I did it on a unnamed cloud hosting provider. It's not my employer, but I wasn't brave enough to have it on any infrastructure I owned. And I wanted one who would support PayPal payments because I didn't want to put a credit card on it, to be frank. So basically, I tried to do the opposite of everything I've done here. Now, my hypothesis was that I could definitely get a container owned in about 10 or 15 minutes. Because, hackers. I was pretty sure, 10 minutes, someone will definitely own it. Anyone want to guess, what containers I thought might be particularly vulnerable that I spun up that would be particularly vulnerable to being owned? Any guesses? Sorry? WordPress, yes! And Ubuntu 14.04, because that one's full of holes. Actually, I've done this so many times now. I've actually spent quite a lot of money on it, as much as I was willing to spend anyway. So what actually happened? Actually, not very much. I have loads of containers and Kubernetes clusters open to the internet, and no one owned them. I'm really sad. And I realize this is kind of semi-giving you the wrong message now when I've just been telling you how important it is to secure your containers. I don't know. It could be that the cloud provider I was using, they had a lot of tools that I wasn't able to see or configure that was blocking it and protecting it. I don't know. But a pen tester who's based in Australia called Atticus, she has come over to the States before and talked. She's a very good public speaker if you ever get the chance to see her. She actually tweeted this a while back in January, saying that she couldn't get, it took a while for her to get a WordPress container owned too. And I was like, cool, if Atticus can't do it, I'm good. So I did, though, have to go and reverse engineer a cloud platform as much as I could to actually get my container owned, which was interesting. And I used a tool called BSad, or it's PSAD, I don't know how you say it. It's an open source tool that looks at the IP tables of Ubuntu and Linux stuff in order to to scan for things that are happening, and it's a bit like a very basic IDS. The most interesting thing I found about this is these whois lookups and how people apparently use these for adverts. So we had, please note that Scenic is not an ISP. Blackhost, I have to read this like this. Specially crafted and optimized for bandwidth-hungry applications. I didn't know whois was now being used as adverts. My favorite one, though, the good old one from China, is security trouble. Yeah, interesting. So, in conclusion, tidy up your application before you do cloud migration and or containerization. You're probably doing them together, but if you're not, tidy up your application. Orchestrated defaults are terrible, so change them. Go and use guides. If you can't use guides, think about using something managed. Please, 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 make sure you know where container images come from. Don't run as root. That's obvious, unless you really need to. Keep your secret secret. Shift left, but make sure you've got the right tools to support it, or you've got the right resource to go and benchmark things. And purposely trying to get containers hacked is apparently harder than one would expect, but don't have that as your final takeaway, despite the fact I just put that as nearly my last slide. It does happen, it is real, so yeah, I don't know what I was doing wrong, or apparently anonymous cloud hosting providers have a lot more inbuilt protection than I realized. Here are some useful links, some of the stuff I've been talking about today. The SIS Kubernetes benchmark, the SIS Docker security benchmark. The NIST special publication 800-190 is the NIST documentation about container security. NIST stuff can be a bit hit and miss, but that one's only 10 pages long and quite accessible, so I recommend you go read it. Liz Rice and Michael Hausenblas wrote a Kubernetes security book that you can get online as a PDF for free. It's pretty up to date, and it goes step by step through securing a Kubernetes cluster, so have a look at that. Obviously, Microsoft have got some stuff on Azure container and orchestrated security, but it's very generic, so it really, most of it applies to everything, not just Azure. And PSAD or PSAD, however you say it, that tool is there. It's done by a chap called Michael Rash. And I think I'm pretty much just up for time, but we might have time for like a question or so. And yeah, that's me. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I'm putting my glasses on now, by the way, so I can actually see people.
When you say not to run as root, do you mean, or is there any information you could give us about like container root versus overall root on the orchestrator or anything like that?
It depends it's really context specific. Like there are times where you will need to run as root, but when you say run as root, do you mean like, obviously you've got the host system and then you have the container. Do you mean the container running as root? Because that's what I was referring to really.
Well, I know in Docker there's the concept of like mapping root to your actual root user on the, outside.
On the host.
On the host, exactly. Yeah. And so I'm wondering in Kubernetes, are you talking about when you say don't run as root, are you talking about don't run, like set up Kubernetes to run in a different way that doesn't map the root user, or are you talking about?
Kubernetes is a little bit different. Really, I'm
Okay.
sort of talking about containers there, the actual container sitting on the host. Kubernetes runs in a slightly different way. You've got like namespaces and stuff, but there's a big debate around whether that's precisely the same or not. We probably don't want to go there.
Any more questions?
Oh.
Thanks so much for your talk. So one hypothesis I have for why it took so long and no one attacked your container was because, the elite hackers probably think it's a honeypot, given that you set up
That's
more than
true.
10 vulnerabilities.
Some of them were ridiculously easy. Like I had a WordPress that wasn't even set up, and then I did one as admin. It was a little bit obvious to anyone who maybe was a elite hacker.
So I'm wondering, based on your experience, what are your techniques to determine if something is a honeypot versus if it's actually kind of a real vulnerability?
That's a good question. I mean, like you've just said, anything that looks too good to be true, attack target-wise, probably is. But the thing is, there are also people who are just lazy, or they've spun up a test instance and forgotten about it. So I think it's really, really difficult to tell sometimes. Like I always tend to err on the side of if it's too good to be true, it probably is. But honeypots are getting much more advanced as well. Like they genuinely look like working proper parts, in like machines, whatever they're trying to be. So to be honest with you, I think for me, I just kind of guess. It's educated guess. Because I would say in equal parts, you could have someone who's just messed up and forgotten about something or made a silly mistake, or it's a far too good to be true honeypot. I don't think there's a real definitive way. If anyone has one, tell me, because I want to know.
Question here.
So how did you know that they weren't owned?
I don't for sure. Like, from what I can tell, they were not owned. Like, I didn't put it up on here, but that cloud hosting provider had some other stuff on their GUI that you could have a look at in terms of like the different kernel calls and like the CPU activity, etc. Like, I'm not saying that I am perfect enough to say they weren't owned, but I am reasonably sure they were not. But like with everything in security, I'm not 100%. This is just my theory. Also, my bill didn't go up enough. I feel like my bill would have gone up. Because not always, but a lot of it is Bitcoin mining. Like that seems to be the easy one that's the most common. And I was thinking that was probably what I would get. But hey, who knows? Maybe they are so smart and so clever that I don't even know they've owned me. And now I'm just going around the world doing a presentation about how I didn't get owned. Maybe. Who knows?
One more question. Anyone? Yep.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Anyone? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.